It's May the 21st and I'm planning to plant out these dahlias today. We're about 2 weeks prior to our usual last frost date, a nominated last frost date, which is the 1st of June, but I'm going to take a little chance and put these into the ground today. These dahlias were the first I got started on the single dahlia tubers, which we stored in cling film last year. A little fly there. These have been going for about 2 months now in their pots, and they're ready to be planted out. There's 11 plants here, and I'm going to put them into this raised bed on their own, because I'm planning to do some tests to try to work out which slug regime is the best, with some evidence. So I'll be using this sort of test bed of dahlias to run some experiments on that, and I'll put the videos up as I do that. So when planting dahlias out, there are some choices to make. Again, it will depend on whether you're growing them for cut flowers, which is what we're doing, or whether you are using them for garden display, or perhaps you are planning to exhibit your flowers. And these choices, which we've talked about before, as far as training your young plants, these choices will determine some of the things that you will choose to do while planting out your dahlia. So the sort of choices are how far apart should you plant them. Now this will depend, of course, on the variety of dahlia that you're planting, and if it is in the garden, then simply follow the instructions that came with the dahlia, because it will depend on the ultimate size of that plant, and also, of course, what you've got nearby. Because we're growing for cut flowers in a commercial way, our choice will be to plant them probably much closer together than you would choose to do in a garden setting. So it's a little different here, because we've got 11 plants, and they're to go in this bed, this raised bed. So I'm simply going to put them in at even spacing. But if you were choosing to put plants into a planting scheme in the main beds, is to keep the plants 30 centimetres apart and 45 centimetres between each row. And that's pretty close spacing for dahlias, and two advantages to that. One is that you get more flowers per square metre, and secondly, because they're closer together, there's less room for weeds to grow. So the distance apart is your first choice. And secondly is how deep to plant. So you can plant your dahlia deep or shallow, or something in between. Now the deeper the dahlia is planted, so for instance you could remove 2 or 3 of the sets of leaves here to allow us to plant this dahlia so that ground level will be at the 3rd leaf here, which means we've got quite a lot of stem, which is at the moment above ground, quite a bit of stem which is now underground. And what will happen then is that because it's underground, the dahlia will tend to put out roots, and there's a good possibility that new shoots will appear below ground level, so that the ultimate plant will have a number of shoots appearing to emanate from ground level. and that will give you a sturdier plant and you could say a bushier plant. The downside of planting deeply is that if the ground is rather wet, let's say it's clay-based soil, then there's more likelihood that your tuber will rot. It certainly shouldn't be a waterlogged ground. So to plant more shallowly will protect the tuber from dampness. And then there's two more things which you need to decide. One is whether you fertilise at the time of planting. Again, there's arguments for and against, and the arguments for fertilising is that, of course, dahlias are very greedy plants and will require fertilising of some sort. Because we are not using chemical fertilisers here, we'll choose an organic feed. In particular, we use this stuff as a mulch. It's bracken, semi-composted, a product called Lakeland Gold, here in the UK from Cumbria, and this will break down slowly and will provide feed throughout the season. It's said to have 2 years of fertilizer in it. So that's a nice, as with most organic fertilizers, that's a nice slow fertilization. We use a surface treatment of a seaweed meal, which is this stuff, seaweed meal, and we just spread it around the plants at a rate of 50 grams per metre, which is the recommended strength. And again, being an organic fertiliser, that will break down slowly and nutrients will become available during the season. You could use blood and bone meal, fish blood and bone meal, and again, it's up to you to decide whether you're going to put that into the planting hole or are going to spread it on the surface afterwards. The downside of putting it into the planting hole is that I mean, if you put, let's say, too much around the roots, then the roots may become scorched, and I prefer to do things slowly anyway, so that I'm going to scatter my fertilizer just around like so. And the last thing for you to decide is how to support your plants. Now, if you're going to use stakes or canes, then the time to put those in is at planting time, so that you're not coming along later and disturbing the roots by putting your supports up. So there's various methods of supporting: a single cane, 3 canes, or 3 stakes, which is common, or else some sort of structure above ground which will support the plant as it grows. We've got these stakes here. These stakes, which are always useful actually around a bed, because they protect it. If you're using a hose, the hose will go to the other side of the stake and so forth. These are quite short stakes, and what we'll do is we'll rig up pea netting, starting fairly low down, and as the plant grows we'll lift the pea netting up. It worked really well last season for us, so I'm going to do that again on the raised beds anyway. On the wider beds out in the field, I haven't decided yet whether to use pea netting or one of the more usual structures, which is wire between the posts. I won't put the pea netting up here until the plants have grown a little. So let's get on and do some planting. It's pretty soft ground, this bed. I've just in fact dug it over a few days ago, so there'll be plenty I'll be able to do the holes with this, some of the bulbs which were here before. Pretty friable ground this, isn't it? So that's looking about right. If you were going to fertilise, you would sprinkle your fertilizer at the base there and then mix it up a bit like so. Oh, I didn't mention that these plants have been watered yesterday to make sure that I'm not planting them up dry. So we look for the height now. That will be around about horizontal with the soil in the pot. So if I was going any deeper, which I did say I would do just to make sure that the plant's nice and stable. Break up the ground below it. If you've got firm ground, then that's useful to help the roots to establish. Put your fertilizer in if that's what you're going to do. And here is our Dahlia. Nice healthy roots, just beginning to be root bound with the roots tracking around the base there. Dahlias have two sorts of roots. One will go deep, and they tend to be the storage, so that the deep roots will store food in and that storage area within the root will become a tuber. Sometimes you even see the beginnings of that process, but in this case not. And the other sort of roots are the feeding roots, which are more superficial. In fact, Dahlias will put out some very superficial roots just underneath the surface of the soil, and it's important that you take great care if you are going to disturb the surface at all, for instance with a hoe. Then do so very, very lightly. Otherwise, you're a chance of disturbing your roots. These are all the same variety, Oreti Bliss, but don't forget to make sure that you've got a labelling system so that you know which Dahlia is where. So we've gone just below ground level, and I'm going to take off a couple of these lower leaves. So you can see what we've got now. We've got the stem just below ground level there, and you can see that the plant is nicely seated there. I think you can firm up. One technique is to allow like a moat around the plant, deeper than the surface of the soil, so that when you do water the plant, the water will stay in the vicinity of the plant. So we'll do that here. So two more jobs. One is to apply our fertilizer. Seaweed meal. And the last job is to water it. Watering actually does two things. It of course provides water for the plant, but as well as that it allows the root system to bed in to the surrounding soil, so that it hasn't got any air pockets knocking about, which aren't good. And you can see, because the soil is so porous here, you can see that water going in. You can see how the moat system works, can't you? Because all of that water stayed in the moat around the plant. And that's it. We've planted our first dahlia for the season. I'm going to get on now and plant the rest of these up. So here we are, we're all planted up. 11 dahlias in this raised bed. So just to recap, these are single dahlia tubers, which, because there's therefore a single stem, I've decided to plant these a little more deeply than level with the surface. That will allow some extra stability. Some new roots may now come out from the portion of the stem which is below ground, and therefore will add to the stability. There may also be some new shoots coming from that area. We'll see as time goes on. So I've planted my dahlias a little deeper. I've allowed a moat around the dahlia, so which will aid watering in the initial stages. In order to allow me to plant these a little more deeply, I've taken away one or two sets of leaves from the base of the stem. And I've done that in each and every case. And lastly, I've applied a fertilizer, a surface fertilizer. In this case it's seaweed meal, around the dahlia, but not actually into the planting hole. That was my choice. I could have put it into the planting hole. So I'm hoping these guys will set roots very quickly. Will continue to grow, and it would be very nice to see our first flower in about 3 weeks' time. Hope for good weather. Thanks very much indeed for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.